her more often, or having a more direct line of communication than just email probably would have helped us be more efficient about it.
Do you think switching to Agile helped that? I noticed that you guys switched from Waterfall
Yes.
to Agile.
And
you kind of
as
got into
part of
that.
Agile, meeting with the customer a lot is important, so that would have been better if we could have.
I'm sorry, one other question. Where was the actual testing of the software? Did you guys test the UI? Did you test the back end? And those were some challenges. Did you test the actual software?
So the actual testing of the software, we took it to Dr. Leslie, and she actually tested the whole UI. She took all the tests herself to make sure that that's what the patients would want. The back-end testing, it was thoroughly tested by all of us who needed it for various parts of it. So we're pretty sure the back-end works. The UI was also tested by all the 30-plus people between 18 to 69 that we tested up in the lab here and at the Memorial Student Center. And it was tested various times on actual people, like they would be the patients who would take the test. Does that answer your question?
You asked the question that it was tested, yes.
Separate question. You said that the user interface, how was that designed initially? I heard that you changed some of the nodes later, and you changed the buttons. So what kind of input did you have, or did you have any input into what that user interface would look like before you designed it?
Dr. Leslie gave us a paper copy of all the tests. However, on the device, the piece of paper is much wider than the actual surface. We wanted to keep it in the same portrait mode, so it was wider. We didn't want to put the nodes too close to the boundaries, but it turns out we put them too far away from the boundaries. So people, if they wanted to go around it on the outside, we thought that would be something they may want to do, but they didn't want to. So we spread those out. We tried to make it look exactly like the actual paper test as much as possible.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a way to actually make it proportional so that the test can remain, so to speak, valid? Right? I'm sure they put that test in such a way to where they planned to put it in a piece of paper.
We kept it as proportional as possible, but if we made it fully proportional, it was actually too small. That's what we had the first time, and there were nodes on the test, and some of them were like lined here, 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 here. Like they were just way too close together. So we tried to keep the proportions the same way, tried to spread them out as much as was allowable.
Anything you learned from this testing in terms of security, in terms of maybe how data looked over where somebody else couldn't see the data that shouldn't have been? So a lot of, you have a doctor role, who's probably doing that with demographics and results, but anything you learned around that from the testing that you did with the student, just realistic?
Well, initially, I suppose we didn't consider it as much as we should have initially before the first time we took the application to Dr. Leslie. From that point onward, we discussed it with her, and she told us that there no names are ever stored. It wasn't something that we knew initially that she wouldn't want to store the names or more information about the patients, but she made it very clear to us that it was only supposed to be an identifier that she would keep track of. So I suppose it was something of a learning experience on what kinds of information doctors would prefer to store on computers outside of their own systems.
What kind of defects did you guys find in the UI and in the back end? In your testing?
Like we talked about earlier, some things were not as usable as we wanted them to be. So we had a significant amount of thought dedicated to, like once we'd gotten feedback that it could be difficult for the average user because we were designing more for like our own use and not considering the average user as much, which would like stroke patients are often older and much less familiar with technology.
So you have usability, but what about functioning? Does it just work perfectly the first time?
We had errors along the way.
It crashed in the first user study.
Yeah.
We tried giving it to someone to take 2 tests in a row, and it just went kaput and died. so we had to fix that. Other than that, actually, surprisingly, it did go really well.
We did have issues upgrading the saving and loading of the test replays. That we often we didn't really design the actual files that stored the test replays particularly well, and so every time we wanted to add on to that, we'd have to manually adjust the files themselves, and so that was kind of not really a usability defect, but that was certainly something we should have.
That's more functional.
That was more of a functional issue that we should have thought about. And I think it's scalable.
I think we've got time for one more question.
I think we don't have time.
So